Welcome to Boomer Banter, the show where we have real talk about aging well. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host. And this podcast is about supplying you with knowledge that informs you, inspires you, and motivates you to take action on the things that will help you age well. And part of aging well is feeling financially secure. If you're like me, the subject of money and finances has never been my favorite topic. My father always told us, pay yourself first, which was great advice and not always easy to follow when you're busy raising kids and living life. Fortunately, I did save. And now at 70, the question is, have I saved enough? We all have Social Security and it's a safety net. And for most of us, though, that's not enough to live on if we want to continue living the lifestyle we've gotten accustomed to. We also have Medicare, and both of these programs seem to be under threat, according to the news these days. We've also all heard about the devastating costs of providing long-term care, nursing home care, or memory care. In my discussion today with Richard Eisenberg, the former managing editor and Money and Work channel editor of Next Avenue, and one of the podcast hosts of Friends Talk Money, we'll talk about how to think about and manage our money in the second half of life. Understanding our money better and taking action from what we learn today will help us age well into our 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. So we have a lot to learn, a lot to unpack. So stand by. We're going to get to it in just a minute as soon as I share these couple of announcements. And the first is that not everyone is able to listen to our show live. And believe it or not, many people in our age group are still not familiar with podcasts. So you know that the information that we have to share is so important to aging well. And you can do your part passing on the way people can connect with our show and share the knowledge. So if you will point people to heyboomer.biz, the homepage, and there they will find the Connect with Us button. And that will get them subscribed. All they have to do is enter their name, email address. They'll get the newsletter. They'll know about the upcoming shows, and they will thank you for this. The other thing is, I want to remind you about the great global giveaway that Rhodes Scholar is offering. It's to celebrate their 50th anniversary of providing outstanding educational trips all around the world and in all 50 states. So what you need to do is go to rhodescholar.org/heyboomer and subscribe to their newsletter. You will then be entered to win one of 7 amazing trips to different destinations around the world. It also includes air travel from select airports. It's a fabulous opportunity. If you don't see the pop-up that says Great Global Giveaway, just put that in their search bar and you will get to the pop-up that way. So one of the advantages of doing the show live, and one of the reasons I still do the show live, is because it allows you to participate, to say hello, to ask questions, to give feedback to things that you hear. And if you're thinking about it, other people are thinking about it. So be sure to continue to participate in the chat through Facebook, through YouTube, through LinkedIn, and let us know what your questions are and what you're thinking. If we're unable to answer them live, we will be sure to get back to you after the show. So let's bring Richard on. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Wendy. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and I'm so grateful that you are willing to join us today.
Well, happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So, you define yourself as an unretired freelance writer. Mm-hmm. What does unretired mean to you, Richard?
Well, as you mentioned, I had been the managing editor for the PBS website Next Avenue until 2022. I'd been there 10 years. I was part of the launch team. And after being there 10 years and turning 65, I felt like I was ready to step away from a full-time job and give myself a chance to try some things that I hadn't gotten to do before. So I call myself unretired. And by that, I mean, I'm writing freelance articles for Next Avenue, for Market Watch, for uh, Fortune. I do the podcast you mentioned, Friends Talk Money. I also get to do some mentoring and teaching at NYU every summer. And I have a
Nice.
chance to do some things that I didn't get a chance to do before. So that's my definition. Everybody has their own.
Yeah. So you're feeling motivated and energized by able to do some of the things you wanted to do. I
Yes,
love that.
absolutely.
So I have a question, Richard. Well, I have a lot of questions, but this first one, I was surprised to read the Employee Benefit Research Institute said that 3/4 of retirees are confident about their ability to have their money last.
Yes.
And on the other hand, we also read that at least 50% of boomers have not saved enough to last them through retirement.
Right.
How do we reconcile that discrepancy?
I had that same question myself, and I've asked the people at EBRI about that, and they're a little puzzled about it too. I think what's happening is a lot of us want to believe that we're going to have enough money to last our lives. Of course, nobody knows how long our lives are going to be, so we're optimistic. Sometimes we're not realistic, and I think it's a little easier to say, "Well, I feel okay right now, and I think things will work out because they always have, or they often have." And I hope that for those people that they are right. But I am concerned that there are a lot of people who haven't saved very much for their own retirement. People are living longer, often healthier lives. And so that means having more years to make your money last. So I hope people aren't overly confident. I'm glad they feel good right now, but I think they could all take a little more serious look at how they're doing, maybe meet with a financial advisor, maybe try some of those great retirement calculators online just to see if they are as comfortable as they think they are.
That's a really good point. And your words about we live longer on one of your shows, on one of the Friends Talk Money shows, I heard you speaking with somebody about the longevity, um, fluency, what is it? Literacy,
Yes,
longevity
that's right.
literacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was fascinating conversation. So can you explain that for the audience?
Yeah, well, the problem is there are a lot of people who don't really understand how long people are living these days. And so you ask them, how long do you think you will live? And they answer with what the age that their parents lived to. And often these days people are living longer than their parents did. So these days, if you are 65, there's a pretty good chance you're going to live to 85. There's no guarantee, of course. Some people live to 95 or longer. But a lot of people think, well, I probably won't, I won't be living to 95. I may not be living to 85. And so they basically plan because they plan accordingly, but inappropriately. And so they're not thinking about, well, what if I do live to 85? Will my money last? Or should I be putting my money in different places in order to make that happen? Should I be thinking about an annuity? Am I thinking about claiming Social Security the right time and the right way? So many people claim Social Security at 62. Many of them need to do that because they need the money. Some people do it just because they're allowed to do it. And a lot of financial advisors say if you can afford to delay until at least your full retirement age, which these days is somewhere between 66 and 67, depending on when you were born, you will get a bigger benefit for the rest of your life. If you can wait to 70 to start claiming, which very few people can, but if you could, you will get an even bigger benefit from that point on through the rest of your life. So, I would tell people if you can afford to hold off claiming Social Security, it'll help you financially. But I certainly understand why many people can't do that and don't do that.
Yeah. So the financial literacy is one aspect, to understand when you should take Social Security and how much money you need to save and all of that. And the longevity literacy, it adds a complexity to it, I think, like, okay, so I have no idea how long I'm going to live.
Mhm.
And then you throw in these, and you talked about this on the show, you throw in these questions of, well, life is short, so live it while I can, right? Go on vacation while I still can. Well, yeah, but then what if you live another 20, 30 years? Is your money going to last you if you go on vacation? So I mean, I think that's one of the reasons money is not one of my favorite topics.
Well, I don't think people should deprive themselves and say, "Well, I can't ever take a trip because, I might live too long and I don't want my money to run out." I mean, I think people need to be sort of open to possibilities, and you know, life doesn't stop at 60 or 65, and you should, if you can afford to do it, and if you are healthy enough to do it, you should get to travel and see places you haven't been and do things you haven't done before. But don't overdo it. Just be realistic and set a budget and say, well, if I were to spend X thousands of dollars on a trip this year to a great place I've never been before, what would that mean to my budget and to my savings? And how often can I afford to do it? And the answer may be once a year or once every few years, and maybe not 3 or 4 times a year. So everybody has to look at it on their own. It also depends on how healthy you are and the longevity in your family and their health experience too. There are some people who sadly can't do things that they would like to do because their health won't allow them to do that. And you just need to be realistic about what's possible, I would say, financially and every other way.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a guessing game in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So let me pivot a little bit. I fortunately got long-term care when I was 50,
Good.
but a lot of people in our age group that don't have it, it's too late. It's too expensive for them to get it now.
And you're talking about an insurance policy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious if there are other vehicles or other ways you would recommend people prepare in case they do suddenly have a long-term illness.
Yeah. So what people need to understand about long-term care is Medicare typically does not cover it. By and large, it does not cover it for most people for most needs. Medicaid does cover long-term care, but you will only qualify for Medicaid if you're low income. There's some other uh, cases where you might, but basically the vast majority of the middle class does not have a federal program that will help them with long-term care. And so it's up to them. And so you can pay for that out of pocket if you have enough savings to do that. Most people don't, but some people do. Or you could buy a long-term care insurance policy. Now, as you said, it makes more sense to buy that in your 50s or early 60s because it's less expensive and you're more likely to be able to qualify for it than if you were to wait to your late 60s or 70s. At that point, not only will it cost you more, there's a better chance that the insurance company will say, sorry, we're not going to write this policy for you at any cost because we don't want to take the chance. We think you may need this too soon. So I would say if you are thinking about it and can do it, you want to try to buy one in your 50s or 60s. The other thing I would say is the long-term care insurance policies have changed a lot in the past few years. Now, some of them come as hybrid policies where it's a combination of long-term care and life insurance. And the reason they've done that is because some people felt, well, I don't know that I want to buy a long-term care insurance policy because what if I never use it? I'll just be throwing money down the drain and for no reason. But with a hybrid policy, if you never need long-term care and you pass away, your beneficiaries will be able to get a death benefit. So somebody will get something from the money that you've been putting in. So people may want to consider that as an option.
That's interesting. So is it still as costly if we're 65, 70 than that a long-term care would be as a hybrid policy would be?
Every company's going to have its own premiums and charges and rules and that sort of thing. I would say I wouldn't look at it as a way to save money necessarily. I would look at it as more as a way of kind of ensuring that the money that you're putting in is going to be used in some way, whether it's for you or for your beneficiaries later on.
Yeah. So you also mentioned annuities, and I had heard my father left an annuity for her, and she, is very grateful for that. She lives on that. But I've heard that annuities nowadays are not good investments. So what are your thoughts around that?
Well, so an annuity is basically a product that you buy through an insurance company that says they're going to pay you a certain amount of money for the rest of your life or for a period of time if you buy a 10-year or 15-year annuity. And sometimes they start immediately, and sometimes you can say, I don't want it to start until I'm at age 80. It's going to be less expensive when you buy it if you delay when it starts. It does give you a lot of peace of mind to know that money's going to be coming in every month. But I will say that they tend to be expensive. They tend to be complicated. And that's why a lot of people don't sign up for them, because they feel like they can't understand them or they can't afford to buy them. But I would say if you would like the idea of knowing that there's going to be a steady income coming in addition to Social Security, and if you're lucky enough to get a pension, you might want to look at an annuity. Just understand what you're getting yourself into. And if you can do it with help from a financial advisor who's objective, a fee-only financial advisor, that would be helpful, because it's very easy to get confused by the way these policies work. They are very complicated.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. If that should be part of your financial plan that you talk through with your financial advisor.
Yeah. But it's scary when you leave a full-time job and a paycheck and suddenly you don't have one at all, and you're wondering, well, how am I going to pay the bills, and where's this money going to come from? And even if you have some savings, it's still a little scary not to have income coming in every month. The annuity can help you do that, but you can also create your own annuity by taking the money you put aside in savings and turning that into a monthly income that you've created. So you can say, okay, I'm going to take out X dollars every month. The financial advisors tend to say the rule of thumb is you want to withdraw no more than 3 to 4% of your retirement savings a year to try to help it last your whole life. So try to use that as sort of a ballpark, although everybody's going to be different.
That's a good idea. Create your own annuity. I like that.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the state of Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah.
I know, right? It's like nothing but bad news, and it is an election season. So,
Right.
Right, that's probably a lot of it, but help me understand what's going on there.
Yeah. So, well, the reality is, there's every year the Social Security trustees come out with a report that says, looking over the next 75 years, here's what we think the future looks like for the solvency of Social Security and for Medicare. And what they said recently is that Social Security's trust fund will start having solvency problems in 2033 in 9 years, and Medicare in 2036 in 12 years. That does not mean that they're going to stop paying benefits in 2033 or that Medicare is going to go broke in 2036. What it means is that if nothing changes, Social Security will not be able to pay 100% of benefits to people that were told they were going to get them starting in 2033. Now, the last time this happened was in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan, and at the last minute, the congressional representatives and the president came up with a plan to extend the solvency for a while. And what they did was they basically raised the retirement age. It used to be 65. Now it's a graduated scale that goes to 66, 67. My expectation is they're going to do something like that again. I don't know whether it's going to mean raising the retirement age or changing the way the benefits are calculated or trimming benefits. I don't think the program is going to go away. I think the people who are at most risk are people in Gen X and younger, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, not so much the boomers, because I don't think, and everybody I've talked to about this has said to me, they don't think that Congress and the administration would make any changes that would affect current beneficiaries of Social Security, or even people who are very close to retirement age of Social Security, 62, 65, 66. But it's for people who are in their 50s and younger, who are probably going to see a different program than the one we have today. Exactly how it's going to be different, nobody knows, and we will find out sometime between now and 2033. My guess is probably in 2032 or maybe in 2033. And the same goes for Medicare. There, it's more complicated. It's the Part A trust fund, which is part of Medicare, but it's not Part B, and that's where the solvency problems are going to be. And again, what I think is going to happen is the people who run Medicare and Congress are going to come up with some solutions between now and 2036 to figure out a way to stave off any solvency issues. Now, that said, these are all just estimates and predictions. And every year the trustees report comes out and it has a different year than it had the year before. Sometimes it's more optimistic than the year before. Sometimes it's less pessimistic. A lot of it depends on how the economy is doing. If people are working and paying in taxes, that's better for Social Security and Medicare because those programs are partly paid by those taxes. If more people are out of work and not paying taxes, that's bad for Social Security and Medicare. So, I wouldn't take those years as fact because they aren't. They are just predictions. They're what the experts think is going to happen, but things can change.
And so what happens, like a lot of us, like you as an unretired person and like me, we're still working
Yep.
and earning some and paying into Social Security then as we're still working. Does that affect our benefits or does that help the solvency to have us work longer?
Well, it certainly helps the solvency to have us work longer because the more of us who are paying taxes in, the more money Social Security has to pay benefits out. The biggest problem is demographics, is that there are more and more and more older people and fewer younger people paying into the system to pay the money in that will be going towards the benefits for the people who are going to need them. And those are long-term trends that at this point don't look like they're going to be changing anytime soon. From our standpoint, the main factor there is that how much you earn over in your late 60s and 70s might affect how much taxes you're going to pay on your Social Security benefits and maybe how much of your benefits you get after taxes. It's a little complicated. There's what's called the earnings test. You can find out all about it on the Social Security website if you want to. So I would say mostly it's a net gain for Social Security that you and I are working and people are working part-time in retirement. And it also means maybe we can hold off claiming Social Security a little bit longer if we have money coming in than if we weren't working and we didn't have money coming in.
Yeah. Doris has a question. She says, what are the arguments for not having people at higher incomes continue to pay into Social Security? I guess there's a cutoff point, right?
Yeah, there's an earnings cap right now, and one of the solutions that a lot of experts talk about to try to fix the solvency problems is to either raise or eliminate that cap, because some people say, well, why should the very wealthiest not be paying the same percentage of their income into Social Security as people who have lower incomes, and that would actually help save Social Security. Others would say, well, that's the way the system was created, and it's fine to have that sort of a cap. I have a feeling that cap is going to get lifted. I don't know that it'll get removed altogether, but I do think probably people with higher incomes in the future will be paying into Social Security than they are today, and I think that probably makes sense for the system.
Yeah, probably does make sense. Philip had a question too. He said, I guess this is, you don't advise clients, but if you were talking to people in their 60s or 70s, would you suggest that they still focus on growth stocks?
Everybody has to think about their own risk tolerance. There's some people who would lose sleep if they had any money in the stock market. And for those people, they shouldn't be in the stock market, whether it's in their 401k or their IRA or on their own. And that may mean giving up a little in investment returns because of it, but they will feel more comfortable. Other people are more comfortable with the idea of taking some risk. I would say typically as you get older, it's smart to have a smaller percentage of your portfolio in stocks because they are riskier than putting it into cash and bonds. The stock market, of course, has been great the past couple of years. 2022 was terrible, but also in 2022 bonds were terrible, and that's very unusual. Usually it's one or the other, but that year everything was lousy. Right now the stock market's very good. The income that people are getting on their bank CDs is higher than it was before because the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates. People getting income from bonds are getting higher income levels than they did before. But when interest rates go up, bond prices go down. So it's not a great time to be selling bonds. So overall, I would say I'd be more conservative about investing in the stock market as I get older into my late 60s and 70s than before. If you are going to invest in the stock market, I would say do it in a diversified way. That is either a Standard & Poor's 500 index fund that buys all the big stocks that are sold, or something along those lines. I would not be putting a lot of money into one or two or three stocks because you just don't know what's going to happen with those companies.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about making our money last, right? So I've been reading about the idea of converting your IRA to a Roth IRA.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about that. And, does it make sense? When it would make sense? And yeah, just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's something that I think you probably want to talk to a tax advisor about. If you've been putting money into what's called a traditional IRA over the years, um, you it's possible that as you get into or in retirement, you may want to convert some of that money into what's called a Roth IRA. The main difference is when the money is going to be taxed on that. And so for some people, converting some money can be a smart idea to save you taxes. For other people, it's not a good idea because if you take too much out through your conversion, that may put you into a much higher tax bracket than you were in, and suddenly you're going to be paying a higher tax rate on all of your income than you would have before. So I would say there is no one easy answer. I would say it's something you want to probably talk to your tax advisor and say, well, can you show me the pros and cons of converting my traditional IRA, or at least some of it, into a Roth IRA? And, when should I do it and how should I do it, or should I not do it? But personally, I've not done it myself, but I know a lot of people have.
So I didn't realize you could do just part of it. You don't
Yep.
have to do the whole thing.
That's right.
And after a certain age, we cannot contribute to our IRA anymore. Is that right?
Well, you can keep contributing as long as you have earned income. What you have to do is start taking money out once you hit what's called the retirement minimum distribution age, which Congress just raised recently. So it's now 73 is when you have to start taking money out. Not all of it, but a portion of it. And the IRS has a formula that basically figures out actuarially how much you should be taking out each year based on how long they expect you to live. So you just need to know that, once you hit that age, you're going to need to take some money out of that IRA. But, I always tell people, you save for retirement so that you have money in retirement. And a lot of people are so nervous about ever taking money out, fearing that they're going to need it, that money is just sitting there. And I feel like, you saved it, you're retired, you should be using it, at least some of it. So don't be too shy about that.
So you take it out, but you can then reinvest it into something else, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Including
you
a
could,
trip.
yeah, you could be for a trip, could be back in the same kind of investments you had it in before, or it could be in something else. It's all up to you, but you'll be paying taxes on that money when you take the money out, and then you'll decide what to do with that money.
Yeah, and hopefully our tax brackets are lower at that point when we start taking it out.
That's usually the case, not always the case. It kind of depends on if you have a pension and how much that is, and if you're claiming Social Security and if you're working. It's possible for some people they might be in a higher tax bracket in retirement if they have all those things coming in. Most people are not in that position. Most people find themselves in a lower tax bracket because they have less money coming in. They don't have their employment earnings. They may not have a pension, or it may be small. They might not be claiming Social Security yet. So it's important to run the numbers before you're in retirement and then each year to figure out what is my tax bracket. And also it may depend on where you're living, because some states have state income taxes, others don't.
Right.
You may retire to a state like Florida that has no income tax, where your tax rate may come down overall than it would have been where you were living before.
So there are things that you can do though to lower your tax. Like if I contribute to a college savings plan for a grandchild, or what else? If I give a gift, charitable gift.
Yep. Some people do that through what's called a donor advised fund. This is something that all the financial services companies have, and basically allows you to decide where you want to put your money for charity, and you put it through this fund so that it becomes a tax benefit for you while going to the charity as well. So that may be something you might want to think about doing. But yes, I would say, look for ways that you can lower your taxes. One of them is charity. it's harder and harder to be able to claim a medical expense deduction these days because the
Mm.
threshold is so high that most people are not anywhere close to that. Most people can't even claim the standard deduction anymore. Or I should say, they can't itemize anymore. They used to do that, but now the standard deduction has gotten so high that it doesn't pay for them to try to itemize. So that's another thing you might want to look at. But then there are some tax breaks that anybody can take. Like if you're going to buy an electric car, you might qualify for a special tax credit for certain electric cars, hybrids, and electric cars that could save you some money on the cost of the car after taxes. So you might want to look into that too.
Hmm. Is solar energy still giving people a break?
Yeah, there's still some energy credits there. They've cut back on those over the
Okay.
years. It's not quite as
Yeah.
good as it used to be, but it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about, I hear this from friends, my kids wants to buy a house, or my kid wants to buy a car, or my kid wants to move back in, right?
Mhm.
Um, eh, how much of a risk should we be thinking about taking if we're giving money and continuing to support an adult child?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's a hard question. You want to be
Yeah.
kind and generous, particularly if your kids need help right now, but you also don't want to break your own bank at the same time. So I think you want to really sort of run the numbers and say, well, what can I afford to give my kids today? Whether that's a down payment on a house, or maybe some money to help them buy a car or something, or pay for medical expenses, and what would be better for you to leave as an inheritance later on. But increasingly, certainly the cost of housing is so high these days, both with mortgage rates and the price of homes, that more and more parents are helping their kids to come up with the down payment to do that. And it's a very kind thing to do. A lot of parents can't afford to do that, and a lot of younger people would like to buy homes and are just locked out because of that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was trying to help my kids get ready for college,
Mhm.
and the advice was, you want to put as much of your money into like an IRA or something where it's not looked at when you're looking for financial aid,
Mm.
because that's not money they can touch. And so they're saying, don't hurt your retirement
Right.
as you're helping them go through school. They have a longer threshold to pay that back.
Right. Well, one of the best things you can do for your child, if they have a child, is to put money into a 529 college savings fund for your grandchild, because as we all know, the cost of college is hugely expensive for many families, and anything you can do to help your children and grandchildren with that cost would be greatly appreciated. And so that can be, one check once a year, or it could be a check every month that goes into the money that goes into that fund. You decide how you want to do it. But that's something that really will pay off in the future, 5, 10, 15, 18 years from now, if you start early. I'm lucky enough to have a new granddaughter, and as soon as she was born, I started putting money into her 529 savings fund, and I'm glad I'm able to do that. And I think my kids are happy about that too.
Oh yeah, she's a cutie too. I've seen her picture.
She is. You're right.
She is. Yeah, and my mother has done that for my kids. And then there's, and you guys haven't faced this yet, but then there's the whole, who should own the 529, and because again, if you give it to the parents while their kids are applying for financial aid, then of course now it looks like they have all this extra money that they can afford. And so there's all these games that you end up playing on where the money is and who owns it so that you can best help.
Yeah, although I would say that they just changed the rules to help grandparents, so that if a grandparent is going to put money into a 529, it is not going to hurt the financial aid for the grandchild when that grandchild is ready to go to college in the way it had until recently. So it's a little less of a problem than it was before.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And is that a vehicle that you also talk to your financial advisor about, or you can just?
You can. I'm not. You don't need to. I mean, it never hurts to talk to a financial advisor about anything having to do with money. But 529 plans are pretty straightforward. Every state offers them. Every financial services firm lets you invest in them through them. There's not that much of a difference from one to another. Some states have special rules about whether if you live in that state, you might be able to get a deduction for the money that you're putting into a 529. Usually you can't, but that you could in some places. And they usually let you invest in any way, almost any way you want. Usually they have what's called kind of a lifestyle fund where the money starts more heavily into the stock market, and as the child gets closer and closer to college, it gets more and more into bonds and less and less into stocks. But you can decide where you want that money to go. And there are a few websites out there that actually compare the various 529 plans and rate them. So if you want to do a little research on that, you can do that. But I would say these days they're fairly similar and not that hard to figure out, and pretty easy to use, I would say.
So does it limit what schools the children can go to? Like, can they go to a tech school as well as a university?
Yeah. So the difference between a 529 plan and what's called a prepaid tuition plan is a 529 plan can be used at any college. And so you put it into this fund, it grows, and then years from now, when your grandchild is ready to go to college or your child, they can use it for wherever they're going to go to school. There are also what are called prepaid tuition plans, and those are for particular schools, often in a particular state. And so often you can get a great discount on going to a state school, but who knows if that child is going to want to go to a state school and still be living in that state or not. So it's a little bit more of a gamble, but I would say that makes more sense when your child is closer to college age and you and they have a pretty good idea that that's where they're going to want to go to school, assuming that they can get in. By and large, I prefer the 529s because it gives you more flexibility.
Yeah. And it does cover tech schools and culinary schools and those kinds of things as well.
Yeah. Any kind of higher education. Yeah.
Okay. And my final question before I ask you to summarize some stuff is, is it better to give a gift now? I think you can give, at least in South Carolina, I think you can give $10,000.
Now it's close to $14,000. Yeah.
Okay.
Without avoiding a gift tax. Yeah.
Okay. Is it better to do that now or to let your funds grow and then just leave them to your heirs when that time comes?
Well, you don't necessarily have to choose one or the other, although in some cases you may have to make a choice because you can't afford to do both. But I would say if it's possible to help your kids while you're alive and you can see them benefiting from it, that's good for you and good for them because you can see that you're actually doing something that's useful, and it'll put a smile on your face and theirs as well. If you can't or prefer not to, you could certainly leave it as an inheritance in your will. So my feeling is if it's at all possible to do it while you're alive, some money, maybe not every year, but whenever you can, and also leave an inheritance later on, if that's possible, that would be really great. But not everybody can afford to do either of those or both of those. So it depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, so much of this does, Richard. Mm-hmm. So I just want you to now leave us with 2 to 3 takeaways that you would recommend as we think about making our money last in our longevity literacy lifestyle.
Well, the first thing I would say is don't just throw up your hands and say, well, I'm hoping it's all going to work out. Even if you're a little nervous that I haven't saved enough and what's going to happen, it's better to be as prepared as possible and know how things really are. And then you maybe find some ways that you can help yourself. So you may find if you use some of these retirement calculators or talk to an advisor that, you either need to save more money or work longer if you can afford to do that, or cut back on your spending either now or in the future. Those are pretty much the 3 options that you're going to run into. And I would say the more knowledgeable you are about where you are and what the future looks like based on your projections, which nobody knows for sure, but as best you can guess, the better off you're going to be. And then it may also put your mind at rest that maybe you're better off than you thought you were, or it may say to you, you know what, I really need to do something now. I have to stop putting my head in the sand. And particularly if you're in your 50s or 60s, there's still plenty of time to take some steps to deal with these possibilities. Now, when you get into your 70s or 80s, it's not too late. It's just later, but it's never too late, I would say. You can always make some adjustments. And as I've mentioned a few times, having a financial advisor can be really helpful because, number one, this is all they do. They think about this all the time. A lot of us don't like to think about it at all, or very not much. And hopefully, if you find a good one, they know more than you do, and so they can say, well, here's what you would want to think about, or if you do this, here's what would happen, that sort of thing. And they can plot some numbers for you and say, well, based on what you've done, here's how we think your money is going to look, when you're 80, 85, 90, 95, that sort of thing. So I would, strongly encourage people to try to meet with one. Now, one thing about financial advisors, they tend to prefer wealthier people. And so a big problem is there are a lot of people who could really use a financial advisor, and they have trouble finding a financial advisor who will talk to them. And I would say for people like that, it is possible. There are financial advisors who charge either an hourly rate or a fee for a plan, or particularly look for low and middle income people, or even to take people on pro bono. So don't assume that if you're not wealthy that you can't get a financial advisor. I will say it's harder to get one, but it is possible to get one.
And what about some of these other companies like Fidelity and Schwab, and will they give you advice if you invest with them?
Yeah, they all have different sort of tiered programs. So they all let anybody call their 800 number and ask a question. And usually that's about like, what form do I need? Or explain to me what this fund is and that sort of stuff. But that's not so much about giving you actual one-on-one personalized guidance. But they often have financial advisors who they work with, that if you pay for them, you can work with them. Some people are using what are called robo-advisors, which are essentially electronic financial advisors, where you give them money, you fill out a questionnaire, they know how old you are, you tell them about your risk tolerance, and they basically manage your money for you. I think that can be great if you just want somebody to invest for you and you don't want to think about it. What I don't like about them is they don't know anything else about you. And so they don't know that you need to pay long-term care expenses for a parent, or you have other issues in your financial life that they may not be familiar with. So, just keep in mind what they do and don't know about you and what you want. I think human advisors are usually better for most people, but the robos are great if all you want is somebody to manage your investments for you. And it's less expensive that way too.
That makes me so nervous, having a robo-advisor.
Well,
I like talking to my person who...
I like talking to people too, but a lot of people are just happy to know that some, if it's not a person, then somehow their money is being invested well for them. And, you can always take your money out or make a change, but a lot of people just don't want to be bothered, or they're nervous that they're going to make a mistake. And this way they leave it to the professionals who said, well, for people of your age who feel this way about the stock market, the best place is for you to have X% in this and X% in that, and we will do that for you. And you can do it that way.
All right. Well, you're full of information, Richard.
Thank you.
I so appreciate it. You can find Richard on his podcast, Friends Talk Money. I really enjoy it. He's on the show with two women who have really fascinating conversations, and they ask all the questions I would want answered. So it's Friends Talk Money.
You.
Yeah. And you can also read some of his columns in Market Watch, Next Avenue, and Fortune.
Yep.
And don't forget to refer your friends to sign up for the Boomer Banter newsletter and subscribe to the show. Send them to heyboomer.biz and check out Road Scholar. My favorite way to travel, roadscholar.org/heyboomer, and see what they have to offer and sign up for that great global giveaway. I want to win one of those trips.
Me too.
Yeah, go sign up. So next week, another important episode in our month of financial episodes. My guest will be Kathy Stokes. She's the Director of Fraud Prevention Programs with the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Kathy leads AARP's social mission work to educate older adults on the risk that fraud represents to their financial security. Fraud is an epidemic that has wiped out the savings of many unsuspecting adults. You're not going to want to miss this, and as Richard said, knowledge is power. This episode of Boomer Banter provided us with knowledge that informed us about longevity literacy, gave us some ideas about preparing for unexpected health costs, provided insights around Social Security and Medicare, and gave us something to think about regarding Roth IRAs, as well as helping the children and grandchildren in college and helping our adult children. The Boomer Banter community is your community for support and inspiration around aging well. And we certainly got a lot of information today. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy.
Boomer Banter is produced by me, Wendy Green, and the music at the beginning is written and performed by my grandson, who is a student at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts.
That's great.
I know. I love that. See you all next week.